Okay, so chapter 2, kind of some different kind of concepts at the beginning, and then we'll kind of come back to some of the stuff we did in chapter 1 and use them in a different way. But start off with what's called conditional statements. And conditional statement is an if-then statement. So if this, then this. So, and you can write almost anything in an if-then format. So if it's Saturday, then it's the weekend. So the if part is the hypothesis, and the then part is the conclusion. Now, you can write an if-then statement. It doesn't have to be true, because remember, a hypothesis is just kind of like an idea. But most of the time they are, but they don't have to be true. Okay? So if you're working on some of the problems and it says write, this statement as an if-then, and you do, and it's not true, that doesn't mean you did it wrong. So, so the first few problems, it's honestly just saying underline the hypothesis and circle the conclusion. So it would just be, here's the hypothesis, and then there's the conclusion. So then you'll have to take some, like after that, and rewrite them. It's just a statement, and then you want to rewrite it as a conditional statement. So if you had this statement, two right angles are supplementary angles. So write that in an if-then statement. If two angles are right angles, then they are supplementary angles. So use some shorthand there, but hopefully you get the idea. So you can add some words in there to make it read nicer. You don't just put if and then shove it in the beginning and the middle. So but so there's not a word for word correct answer, but you can hopefully get the idea. So if two angles are right angles, then they are supplementary. Okay. So this would be, again, like the hypothesis. Two angles are right angles. Conclusion. Then technically the then part isn't part of the conclusion. Okay. So you'll have a few problems that ask you to just take a statement and write it as a conditional statement, an if-then statement. Okay. All right. Then there's this idea of something called a negation, or to negate something. And it's really just put not in the statement, and you've negated it. So if you had a statement that said today is Monday, even though today's Tuesday, but today is Monday, to negate, you would just say today is not Monday. You're not changing it to like today is Tuesday to fix it. You're just saying today is not Monday. If the statement was today is not Friday, the negation is today is not Friday. Well, if it's not, then it really is. It's like not is like a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay? So, negation. Alright. Then we're going to come to some other like versions of conditional statements. Okay? So if we had a conditional statement, if you are a guitar player, then you are, should have done a shorter one, a musician. And that's true. If you play guitar, you're a musician. Okay? So then, now we're going to do what's called, so this would be a conditional if then. So now we're going to do something which is called the converse, which is to switch if and then parts. So not actually switching the if, the word if and the word then. So you would say if you are a musician, then you are a guitar player. So the first one is true. The second one, the converse, is false. Because if you're a musician, you could play piano, you could play other instruments. You don't have to just play guitar. So you can write a converse, you can write a conditional. They don't always have to be true. Okay? Alright. So then we have something called the inverse. Okay? The inverse is to negate. So we just talked about a negation. But to negate if and then on the conditional statement. So if you are not a guitar player, then you are not a musician. So that's an inverse. False. If you're not a guitar player, then you're not a musician. Well, if I am a piano player, then I am a musician. So just because I don't play guitar doesn't mean that I'm not a musician. I could play trumpet or some other instrument. Okay, and then one last one, kind of a weird contrapositive. You're going to negate the converse. So we look at the converse up here. If you are a musician, then you are a guitar player. So if you are not a musician, then you are not a guitar player. True or false? If you are not a musician, which means you don't play an instrument, then you are not a guitar player. So that one is true. Okay, so you're going to have a few problems, and just a few, that's going to ask you to write all four. Write the conditional statement, the converse, the inverse, the contrapositive. Okay, and they use these little, I'm going to put them in red, but they use these P and Q stuff. So for like shorthand. So a conditional statement, so go way back up over here, has a P, an arrow, Q. If P, then Q. So the then is like the arrow. Okay, so the converse, remember we're switching the if and the then parts. So it's Q with the arrow to the P. Okay. Inverse, we're negating the if then. So the negating like part is this little like squiggle. Not P, then not Q. It's kind of the way you say it. Okay, and then the contrapositive, you see this negative Q, or excuse me, it's not a negative. This squiggly. Not Q, then not P. So you'll see that shorthand periodically. So it would be good if you could kind of tie those things together. All right. One more thing. Something called a biconditional statement. And it means that the conditional and converse are true. Okay, so if you had just a statement. 2 lines intersect to form right angles. Now let's just start it with if. If 2 lines intersect to form right angles, then they are perpendicular lines. So you should have talked about that in algebra, but if you didn't, that's okay. So if 2 lines intersect to form right angles, then they are perpendicular. That's true. Okay, so what it's really saying is if you had these 2 like lines that crossed and you saw that little right angle symbol, they're perpendicular. They also make right angles. Okay, so that's conditional. So if I did the converse, if two lines are, that is the symbol for perpendicular. If 2 lines are perpendicular, then they form right angles. That is also true. So if you know they're perpendicular, then they form right angles. If you know they're right angles, then you know they're perpendicular. You can go back and forth. Okay, this is an example of something that can be written as a biconditional statements. And so the biconditional would be, and there's no if and then in a biconditional statement. So you kind of transfer it like this. 2 lines intersect to form right, to form right angles, and here's the biconditional part. If and only if they are perpendicular. So we still have the if part, 2 lines intersect to form right angles, and then the then part, they are perpendicular. But we have this if and only if. So if you see that, that means you can start with 2 lines that form right angles and your conclusion can be they are perpendicular, or you can start with perpendicular lines and your conclusion can be then they form right angles. You can go both directions and they're true. Okay, that doesn't always happen. Shorthand, you can go both directions and it's true. Okay, so most of your assignment today, actually I think all of your assignment today, is just writing these sentences, for lack of a better term, but writing the conditional and biconditional and converse and all those different things. Okay, so rewatch the video if you need to. I don't want to overload you with tons and tons of examples, because some of you I'm sure got it, but if you don't have the different like terms, rewatch the videos. That's a good like tool for you to use. Okay, all right, check your answers. They'll be on the school website. That way, if you have questions tomorrow, we can get those taken care of. Okay. Have a great rest of your day, guys.